How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Relentless Growth Podcast. I'm Jack Maher, here with my good friend Chase Calhoun. We've got a great episode to bring you this morning, kind of on accountability and record keeping and how that plays a factor in our businesses. But before we do that, we're going to start out this episode like we do every episode with a little update and a little good news, hopefully, from Chase here. So what's going on, Chase?
Hey, good morning, everybody. I think so. For us, we're investors and builders based out of Central Arkansas. We do internal single family, small multifamily build to rent, hold projects, but then we're also doing a lot of that stuff for customers. So we actually had a positive meeting with somebody yesterday who there are other investors that are here kind of locally in the area we're at. And the person that we met with, I had never met or dealt with in the past, but I came to find out that they've got a stalled out build to rent project close by that I guess they're having issues with their builder. So they were asking if we'd be interested in basically taking it over and finishing it for them. And come to find out, like, the partner on the project is one of my good friends. And so I'd heard about this 2 years ago when he was talking about trying to get it through, kind of the development process and stuff. And so it'll be an easy one for us to do. I think we'll be able to do a little bit better job than what they were dealing with their kind of past builder, because we've got some expertise in it. It'll be a good little customer project for us. How about you?
Yeah, that's awesome. Jack Mayer again. Our company's John Mayer Builders here in Spring Hill, Tennessee. It's about 30 minutes south of Nashville, and we build new construction, single family and multifamily. Um, and so, lately, what I would say, we're coming off, both Chase and I run EOS, and so we're just coming off of a great quarterly meeting that we brought
All
our
right.
implementer in to help with. Um, and so it was just, some of their expectations for the people who are out there who don't know EOS is that you're open and honest and you have good conversation. And so that always, sometimes that's a challenge. And this quarter, man, we had fantastic conversation. We really dug into some great issues. And I think we made a great plan for the next quarter. So it's always good when you come out of those quarterly or yearly meetings, like a little bit refreshed, feeling like you've got a plan to move forward. And so that's definitely the win coming out of the last week for me. Um,
Okay.
and then to kind of transition, Jason and I were talking about this a little before the episode. Something that's just front of mind for both of us just recently with situations we're dealing with is the importance of accountability in your business and the importance of your ability to keep records, to stay accountable, whether it's subs, customers, cities. And so something just to bring everybody in, a situation that we're dealing with right now is we've got a local city that we build in, and it's a neighborhood that we developed, and we made a change a couple of years ago at the request of the city. And they said, hey, your sidewalks need to be like this. We'd like you to change that. We know that it's not according to code, but the code's about to be updated, and we want you to do that. And we fought it a little bit, and we said, okay, you know what, we'll do it. That's fine. Um, and so we just got an email last week, and it was like, hey, your sidewalks don't match your plans, and we're going to need you to submit a plan change or like make it what the plans say. And the individual who told us that, they left the city 4 or 5 years ago, and so it's going people back, and it's going to verbal conversations. And so this is one of the real time situations, and it's relatively small in the scheme of things. You're dealing with a couple sidewalks, but it brings up a lot bigger point of when you're having verbal communication with subs, with customers, with the city, whatever it is. Having a very high degree of follow through, of follow up emails saying, hey, what was said? Hey, here's what we agreed to. Um, because sometimes it's, again, I don't blame anybody we're dealing with right now for this problem, because they're trying to do exactly what their job is, make sure it matches the plans, and they don't know the history of it. And so, a lot of times people change more than you think they would. Businesses get bought and sold. And so just kind of the importance in our experience with the ability to recall that information, to have an agreement, and just make sure that that's present. But what about you, Chase? What's been you guys' experience with things like that?
Yeah. So I think this is something it's like an important, just like a tactical thing for people to think about, whether they're like small first time investors or new business owners, or they're big businesses, right? But just like kind of overly communicating and documenting. I think some people like think of like, oh, documenting the conversation like it could be a legal thing or a litigious thing. Like it's just so you don't have, I look at it so that you don't have like miscommunication and misunderstandings in this when you brought it up to me before we jumped on here, it's like I literally had this conversation with my director of operations this morning with a customer, like, or about a customer situation. And it's like the guy's a freaking awesome customer and a great guy. He's super busy and he's got a million things going on. He'll call and like they'll talk about something and then they'll hang up the phone. And a couple weeks will go by and they'll be like, "Hey, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that?" And it's like, "Bro, you called me and asked me to." Like, it's very simple. And so one thing I learned early on, and where I really started to learn was with communicating and dealing with subcontractors. But it's the same thing whether it's a city or a customer or whatever. I told him it's like it literally, as soon as you hang up the phone with them, send them a text or an email and just be like, "Hey, just to reiterate, this is what we talked about. We're going to do X, Y, and Z." And it's like not because we're not worried about them suing us or getting mad. And it's like it avoids that like conversation down the road when it's, hey, why did you do that? Be like, "Hey, let me forward you the email after we talked about it." And then they read that and they're like, "Oh, cool." And so I've personally had customers that were like that, but like 10 times worse. Like they'd get mad. They'd be like, "Why'd you do this?" Or "Why is it more expensive?" Like, I'm like, "Bro, we literally talked about it like a week ago." But they would just forget. It's not because they're like trying to get one over on you. It's just because they're busy with a million other things and they totally forget. So like to avoid that, I would either send that text message or that email, just kind of summarizing what we had talked about. That way I could just be like, "Hey, I'm going to forward you the text message. I'm going to forward you the email." Another place where I used to do it often, and I think we do a good job at it now with like our project management software or emails, but is with negotiating prices with subcontractors. It's a little bit different with new construction as we continue to do more and more new construction, because a lot of our prices are just, it is what it is. We're paying per square foot. Like we're not even asking. We know what the per square foot price is on something. Like we're just going to tell them to go and do the work, and we'll get the invoice, we'll check it, but it shouldn't be any different. But where I used to see it a lot was early on, and I would have subcontractors come out and bid something, and then it would be several months later, and then they would try to charge more. And I'm like, "Well, it's not the price that we talked about." But it gets into this whole like, if you just talked about it, it's like if they think that, and maybe they're not doing it on purpose, maybe they honestly thought they'd quoted it more. It becomes this like almost confrontational situation. And so what I would do way back then, early on, just on rehabs, is I'd be like meeting with the subcontractor, even if we're in person, standing in front of each other. They would give me a price, and I'd pull out my cell phone and I would text them, "This address, this is the price, send." And then when it was 3 months later and they do the work and they send me an invoice for an extra $1,000, it's just like, I'm like, screenshot the text message and send it to them. And it would just nip that in the butt. So it's not necessarily that they were doing it on purpose. Maybe they just forgot or misunderstood or whatever. It just avoids that conflict by kind of over communicating that stuff on the front end.
I think it's a great point, and I think so far we've kind of talked about it external to your business, and I think the same thing is true internally. And I think that's a problem like that EOS helped us solve with weekly
Yeah.
meetings and writing down to dos and who's responsible for them. Because there's a lot of times, I mean, even with EOS, we have it all the time where you've got 3 or 4 people together, you're talking about an issue, you talk about 7 or 8 ways to solve it. And unless you wrap up the meeting with exactly what you're going to do and then follow up with, an email, a text, something written down with it, again, it's no fault of anybody's, but 3 of those people could think we ended on option C. And I'm fully confident that I told everybody we're doing option E. And then it gets done. It doesn't get done the way I think it should get done, but they did exactly what they thought they should do. And so we both end up frustrated. And
Yeah.
so just clarity, accountability, and it's really it's on the leaders. It's on Chase and I. It's on us to instill that in our people so that they execute it when they're having conversations and negotiations with subcontractors or things like that. And it's also on us to do it with our direct reports. And I think it's a really simple thing that when you're small, like it really works fine without it. And so it's
Yeah.
really tempting to not do it. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the catch-22 that everybody gets into, is by the time you really need it, you should have done it a while ago. And
So,
so it's way
yeah.
easier to just start out with an abundance of accountability and abundance of, hey, check-ins, hey, here's what we decided on. And again, it seems over the top. It seems like you're probably annoying people or bugging people, but getting in that habit early on when you grow or when you scale or when you add people and that's part of your culture, I think it's a really important thing because again, I think most communications, I love the quote, don't attribute to malice what you can to ignorance. And I think most of the time that's what most arguments come from. It's not,
Yeah.
hey, the sub's trying to get paid more for the work they said they would do for less, or hey, it's not that our employee willingly did what he thought we didn't want him to do. Most of the time they thought they were doing the right thing. And so whatever tools, whatever help we can give them to help them understand fully what's right. Because at the end of the day, if they don't understand what our goal is and why we're doing it, then that's our fault. And so I think it's a really critical point, whether it's inside your company, outside your company, to make sure that everybody has it front of mind on what exactly the goal is with whatever you're doing.
Yeah. So as you're talking about this, one thing that comes to mind to me, and it's like painful for me when I think about them, but I think they're important, is like SOPs, standard operating procedures. And so that's one thing that like early on, this it was all in my head, right? How we do things. But as we start to scale and through implementing EOS, like that's one thing that again, that came up this morning, like with our internal projects that we're building to hold, like I was running through some of the numbers, and some of the numbers, honestly, like they don't look that great as far as like the returns on them. And so my kind of initial question is like, why are we doing these to hold them? Maybe we should be doing them to sell them, or maybe we should just be pausing on them for a little bit until they make more sense and just focus on the projects that make sense. But again, we don't have any internal procedure on how we're evaluating these. So instead of getting like puffy about it or what it's just, we should be better about this. Let's talk about it in our leadership meeting. Let's come up with a clear path on like how we should be doing this, like in a perfect world, and let's just ride it out. And then that way, like moving forward, we have like a clear written out, like when we're evaluating internal projects, like we're going to underwrite them like this. Here's the percentages for that we're going to use for of total project costs for taxes and insurance, and what we're going to underwrite for vacancy and for project management expenses, etc. Like it's all written out. Here's the cash on cash return, or the cash invested in the deal we want to hit, and here's the very slim cash flow that but something, right? We need to get a minimum cash flow, but it's all written out and it's all planned. And then that way, moving forward, whether it's me or my director of operations, or hopefully at some point, like even a lower level person that's looking at new deals, it's just very spelled out. Like, here's how we underwrite them. If it makes sense, let's take it to the next level. But then we should probably have another, like once we get to appraisal, maybe we should recheck it and make sure it still makes sense before we move forward. That way we're not like halfway through a project and realize that it's not really worth doing and questioning why we did it. And that's just one example that's fresh for me. But we've experienced the same thing with like how we're handling delinquencies or evictions and these certain things that there's like maybe a really good way to do it. But as we're growing and we're bringing more people to help, we really want to systematize how we're doing these core things we're doing and documenting it so that there's no confusion. We can hold each other accountable.
That's a great point. And I think that holds true for a lot of things. We've got some really good people in our office that run the financial side of things, and they know the numbers really well. And so, when we get a bid, they get those numbers and they can extrapolate them and understand what it means. And I think it really what that made me kind of riff to is kind of the importance of understanding like historical cost and how that goes into bids and how that plays into everything. Because there are certainly times when we get a big number on something, or we get an end of the day number on a sub, and we think, hey, that's either good or that's either bad, and we have our first impression. But then there's, hey, when you go back and check it historically, like maybe that number we thought was, crazy big. When we look at historical costs and we look at how big that project is, hey, it makes a lot of sense. Or we get a number that's really low, and maybe it's a sign that they missed something. So understanding like the context of numbers and the context of situations is another thing. And I've been bad at this, but one thing I've attempted to do is record like the circumstances around decisions we've made.
Okay.
Um, because sometimes it's really interesting. You get 3 months later and you're like, man, why in the world would we have ever done X, Y, and Z? That makes no sense. Like we put ourselves in we made the problem worse. Like, why would we have ever done that? When you look back 3 months ago at the facts you knew at the time, what you were dealing with, the situation you were in, you made a logical decision. But it's very hard. It's very hard to remember those situations at the time. And so
Yeah.
I've not figured out a great system for it yet, but it's something that I really want to do because a lot of times we're making the best possible decisions we can. And then, yeah, hindsight's always 2020. But if you record, hey, this is why we did X, Y, and Z, then it's better and easier to understand, like, hey, why we did this.
Yeah.
Here's what's changed. Here's why we need to update that decision.
You guys are running EOS. Are you using software to document the meetings? So like, and I'll
We
give you
are.
you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So we use EOS 1. Um, we use,
We use something called 90.io, which isn't, it's not in the US, but it's like one thing we've been doing, and we need to be better about maybe making notes about that. I think that's a great idea, making notes as to why we made the decision. But like one thing I'll do is if I put something into IDS, not during the meeting, like, but during the week, I may dump something into IDS that comes to mind that we need to talk about. I may go into like chat or just like write some notes about what I was thinking when I put it in there. Cause one problem I'll have is I'll put something in there that I think we should talk about because it's a problem. And then we'll like it a week later, we're in the leadership meeting. I can't remember the context to why it was even became an issue. So I'll put like notes as to here's the problem that I'm thinking of. Here's maybe my thoughts on it. And then we can talk about it at a later date. I think a good step up for that would be to actually document what why we decided to go the route we're doing, and then we'll archive it, but it's still there. Like we could go back and look it up later if we wanted to, because it doesn't go away once we archive that issue.
no, I think it's a great point. And I think it's a great point with notes. Like I'm a big handwritten note person. I've got a remarkable that I live and
Yeah.
die by. But a lot of times I'll use shorthand, or I'll abbreviate things and it makes perfect sense
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
in the meeting and I
Yeah.
fully understand the situation. And like I'll send the notes to my executive assistant to like make an agenda for a meeting or something, and she'll send me an email. A, because my handwriting is pretty difficult to read, but B, because sometimes a problem is a one word thing, and sometimes she'll send me something, and I'm like, I have no idea.
I don't remember.
I don't know what that meant in that situation. Like I could guess, but like, so it kind of when we're talking about record keeping and things like that, it's really easy to think you're always going to understand like the notes you're keeping and things like that. But like going overboard of adding in a little extra detail, a little extra context, especially about big stuff. You can't do it about everything, but just so you can better understand the situation in the future for yourself. And again, that's a really little thing, and that's probably a personal problem for me. But I think it's something that I've had to change how I do over the years because I ended up with a notebook full of things that I could make sense of 75% of them, and 25% of them weren't worth anything. And so that's just a very small tactical change, but it's been something helpful for me to think through as I'm taking the notes. Like, hey, is this going to make sense 3 months from now when I reread it? And am I going to be able to understand the situation? And a lot of times my first pass is like, no, I'm probably not going to be able to totally understand the situation. So just an interesting thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's great. I think the documented thing's great. It kind of circled back where we started with it, like the dealing with cities. I know in the past when we've had like kind of issues with the cities where maybe we disagreed on something, or it was a concern that it could be contentious or be a legal issue. Almost always try to like communicate via email, although sometimes I feel like they're hesitant to do that because they don't want it to be used like against them. But I still like the idea of like, and this is one thing we should have done that we didn't, but they wouldn't communicate via email, but they would meet with us in person. And like after meeting with them in person, like I was taking notes as to what we were talking about, but I probably should have like followed up in an email. Hey, just to recap what we talked about in person at the meeting, this, and this, and just kind of send it to them, even if they don't respond or acknowledge it. It just like, it's almost like hey, this is in my opinion, this is what we talked about. And you never responded and said differently. And so just having some kind of like documentation, and again, not to like try to not to try to be contentious with people or fight with people, just making sure everybody's on the same page. And especially with communicating, and I will say this is almost going like kind of, we're talking like cities and businesses and stuff like that, but it also makes me think about like communicating with my wife. It's very easy to miscommunicate sometimes with people, and I'd say maybe with my wife is where I'd see it more than like in a business setting, where it's like we could talk about something. Like sometimes I have to like spend the extra time to make sure that I understand from the other person's point of view, because sometimes it's just a simple miscommunication. Like somebody's saying something to you and you think you understand, but maybe you don't really understand. And so it's like spending the extra time to kind of reiterate, hey, this is what we talked about. Is this what you're trying to tell me? Again, I think it's probably something that's more important for me, like in my marriage with my wife, to make sure that we stay on the same page and we're communicating well. But it could also be used well, like in meetings and stuff. So like I'd say, if you're not 100% sure, like you're talking about something and you're not 100% sure you're on the same page, like it's worth like asking, like, hey, this is what I'm understanding. Is this correct? Just to make sure that there's not that miscommunication there. Cause it surprises me sometimes how it's possible for like to miscommunicate. And it, for me, like where I can hear somebody say something and think I understand what they're saying, but it's like I really don't. And so sometimes I got to really hammer that down and make sure I understand it.
No, I think that's I think the personal applications of this are immense, and there have been many times when I do something and I'm like, no, we talked about that, and she's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we talked about it, but like we didn't decide to do it. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I
I
I
thought we
thought we
did.
did.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but what it really does is it just like if there's going to be a conflict point, and conflict doesn't have to be a bad thing,
Yeah.
not like a fight or not something with a city, but it takes that conflict point from weeks or months out into the future when you execute on it, and it just moves it up to,
Yeah.
hey, we can handle this in this meeting, or if we send a follow up email, we can handle it the next day. Of if we're not totally on the same page, tell me, and then we can react and we can make it right. And so if you're not on the same page, there's going to be conflict at some point. And the longer it stretches out between y'all having the conversation and whatever it is being implemented, the greater the chance for conflict. And so if you bridge that gap, make sure you're on the same page right away, then you can move forward confidently, knowing that whether it's a decision on whatever to a vacation to take next at home, or if it's a big deal or a big monetary thing with a city or a county or whatever it is, you can move forward confidently knowing, hey, I crossed my I's, or I dotted I's, crossed T's, I made sure everything's right, and I'm confident moving forward, and we're both on the same page. And so I think, again, I think a lot of times it's not malicious. It's just we're people, and we don't we hear things differently. Different words mean different things to different people, and it's about like eyewitness testimony. There's all sorts of studies on how two people standing side by side watching a situation happen have vastly different eyewitness testimonies, and so in our minds we're always the total reliable solution. And it's just scientifically, it's not even remotely true. And so we've got to rely on outside sources and follow through to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward.
Yeah. And I know this isn't like a sales pitch for EOS. I think but I do think that's where like the EOS, the IDS. And so for people that don't know, your IDS is a place where you can come together and try to solve basic problems in the business, but you want to identify and like clearly state what the problem is. So like, that's the first hard part, is like, what's the actual problem? And then you want to discuss it. So discuss what the problem is or potential solutions, and then choose a solution. But like a step forward for us is, once we choose that solution, we should be able to assign that hopefully some kind of actual to do that somebody's going to own. And so it's like, again, we're making sure that we all fully understand the issue. We're all on the same page with what the solution is. And then somebody's going to do something to like resolve or at least move it to the next step. And I think it comes down, it's like a structured way to handle that communication thing. Because for me, especially as an entrepreneur, it's very easy for me to like be having a conversation and then me to be working through it, but I'm not actually saying, speaking it out loud. And that forces you to kind of do that. So I think it's a great way to handle some of that stuff. And again, like, document it and have an actual approach to deal with it. So.
No, I think you're spot on. Yeah. Yeah, kind of, if I was going to wrap it up with like what my takeaway would be, I think it's just, to me, it's start small. It's, the next time you have a conversation, or whether it's with your wife at home, whether it's, with your spouse, your kids, whatever it is, just in the meeting, a meeting, that's a very formal term, in the conversation with like a check back in. Hey, here's what I think we talked about. Here's what I think we decided. Are we on the same page? Great. Perfect. It's a super simple thing to implement in your life, but it will make a big difference. And then on the business side, I think you've got to get much more into the, hey, send a follow up email or send a text recording numbers or what the decision was. Um, but it's a really simple thing, and I think the hard part about it is, it takes a little bit of time on the front end. And we're all running from thing to thing, and it's like, we'll take the 5 or 10 minutes after a meeting to draft an email, send it off, and get that agreement. Because you always in your head, you're like, all right, I'll email them. I'll email them tomorrow morning. And then something comes up tomorrow morning and you never do. So just immediately after things like that, take action, send an email, follow through, and I think the benefits will be huge in the long term.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if it was for me, it would just be to document it. And so if it's at a higher level business thing, like you said, maybe that's a formal agreement. But if you're just getting started out as an investor or you're a smaller business, like just if you have a conversation or either on the phone or in person, just send that simple text. Hey, this is what we talked about. This is what we agreed on. And then boom. And then that way just it avoids that potential for future conflict later. Because it's just you can go back here. Here's a screenshot of the text that where we agreed on the price for this work or whatever. It avoids that. And again, higher level in business, maybe it's formal agreements, emails, stuff like that. But I think when you're first getting started out, just a simple text message is better than nothing.
No, that's perfect. Well, hey, thanks everybody for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. Um, if you enjoyed this episode or other episodes, please leave us a 5-star rating, hopefully, but a rating nonetheless. Let us know in the comments if you'd like to hear more about this topic or others. And if this is something that you listen to consistently, give us a follow so that you get alerted when new episodes come out. We're here every week, and we really enjoy doing this. So we always look forward to hearing from people. So thanks, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good one.